I still remember the exact sound of their laughter. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel in the way you'd expect cruelty to be. It was quiet, almost polite, the kind of laughter people share when they think they already know the whole story. When Marcus from accounting leaned over to Patricia and whispered something behind his hand, and she pressed her lips together, trying not to smile, I saw it. I saw all of it. I was standing in the middle of the open office floor, a small cardboard box in my arms, my access badge already deactivated, my email already locked, and they were laughing. I was 34 years old. I had given 6 years of my life to that company. 6 years of early mornings, missed dinners, canceled vacations. I had sat in that same Seattle office through 3 rounds of layoffs and watched colleagues I respected pack their own boxes and walk out. I had always survived. I had always been considered essential. And now here I was, being escorted toward the elevator by a woman from HR whose name I had never learned, while the people I had worked beside every single day tried to hide their smiles behind their coffee cups. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had seen this moment coming, not because I was careless, not because I had failed, but because 8 months earlier, I had discovered something inside that company that someone very powerful needed to disappear. And when information becomes dangerous, it isn't the information they erase. It's the person who found it. But that part of the story comes later. First, you need to understand what I was walking away from, and exactly what I was being asked to carry in silence. It was a Thursday in March 2015, and Seattle was doing what Seattle does best: gray sky, thin rain, the kind of cold that doesn't freeze you but just quietly drains the warmth out of everything. I remember that detail because I had walked to work that morning. I always walked on Thursdays. It was a ritual I had kept for years, a way to clear my head before the week collapsed into the chaos of end-of-week deadlines. I was a senior data analyst at a mid-sized logistics technology company. We built software that helped shipping companies track and optimize their freight operations. It wasn't glamorous, but it was precise work, and I was good at it. I understood systems. I understood how data moved through structures and where it could break. That skill, that particular way of seeing, was exactly what led me to the problem. And the problem was exactly what led to that Thursday morning. My manager called me into his office at 9:47 a.m. I remember because I had just poured my coffee, and the cup was still in my hand when his assistant appeared at my desk with that careful expression people wear when they're delivering bad news on someone else's behalf. The walk to his office felt long, even though it was only 30 feet. He was sitting behind his desk with a man I didn't recognize, mid-50s, expensive shoes, the kind of calm that comes from having lawyers on retainer. He told me my position had been eliminated. He used the word restructuring. He said it twice, as if repetition made it more real. The man with the expensive shoes slid a document across the desk. Severance agreement, non-disclosure clause, a number that was generous enough to feel like a warning. I didn't sign it that day. That decision, that one quiet act of refusal, would change everything. Walking out of that building was the longest walk of my life, not because of the distance, but because of what was happening on either side of me as I moved through the office. Word travels fast in open-plan offices. By the time I reached my desk to collect my things, people already knew. I could feel the shift in the air, the way conversations paused, the way eyes moved toward me and then quickly away, the way people suddenly became very interested in their screens. I kept my face still. I had always been private, and I was determined not to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me break. I took my time. I placed my framed photo, my notebook, my small cactus, the one I had kept alive on that windowsill through 3 Seattle winters, carefully into the box. I didn't rush. I didn't look up. But then Marcus made the comment. I didn't hear exactly what he said because he said it low, turned toward Patricia. But I caught the shape of the words, and I caught her reaction. And then I caught 2 others near the printer who had overheard, and the ripple of it, that small, terrible ripple of amusement, moved through the space like something alive. The assumption was obvious. They thought I had been caught doing something. Nobody gets walked out with a box in the middle of a Thursday morning for a simple restructuring. That's what they believed, that I had made a mistake, that I had been sloppy or dishonest or simply not good enough. 6 years, and that was a story they were willing to believe about me in 30 seconds. What I carried in that box was lighter than what I carried in my chest. And none of them, not one, stopped to ask a single question. 8 months before that Thursday, I had been running a routine audit on our data pipeline, the kind of background maintenance work that nobody notices until something breaks. And something had broken, not visibly, not catastrophically, but in the way that serious structural problems always begin, quietly, deep inside, invisible to anyone who wasn't specifically looking. What I found was a pattern of falsified delivery metrics in one of our highest value client accounts. The numbers being reported to the client didn't match the raw operational data I was pulling from the back-end systems. The discrepancy wasn't small. Over 18 months, the gap between what was promised and what was actually delivered, and what was being reported as delivered, represented a significant financial fraud. I'm using careful language because even now, I choose my words deliberately. But the truth was simple. Someone was lying to a major client systematically, and had been doing so long enough that it had become embedded in the reporting architecture itself. I documented everything. I built a clear, traceable record. I brought it to my manager with full report and a recommendation that we disclose the error to the client and conduct an internal review. He thanked me for my work. He said he would escalate it. And then, for 3 weeks, nothing happened. When I followed up, I was told the situation was being handled at a senior level. When I followed up again, I was told to focus on my current assignments and trust the process. When I submitted a formal written concern to the internal ethics channel, I received an automated acknowledgement and then silence. What I didn't know then, what I would only understand later, was whose name was connected to that falsified account, and why that name made my report not a solution, but a problem. I didn't sign the severance agreement. My sister thought I was being stubborn. A former colleague told me I was making a mistake, that I should take the money and move forward. And I understood their logic. I had no income, a lease renewal coming up, and absolutely no certainty about what came next. Refusing felt like standing in a river and insisting the current stop. But something in me couldn't let it go. Not out of anger, not out of pride. Because of something simpler, I had documentation. I had dates, file names, version histories, email threads. I had built the kind of record that doesn't disappear when a person does. And before I handed in my access badge, I had taken precaution that careful, quiet people take when they've been in a room with expensive shoes and non-disclosure clauses. I had copies. Over the following months, I worked methodically. I connected with a former colleague who had left the company the previous year under circumstances that now seemed less coincidental. I reached out carefully to one investigative journalist who covered the logistics technology sector for a regional publication. I did not make accusations. I simply offered documentation and let the record speak. The story broke 14 months after I walked out of that building. It was not a massive national headline, but in our specific industry, it was significant. The client that had been misled launched a formal audit. 2 senior employees were placed on administrative leave. The man with the expensive shoes, whose name I had by then learned, and whose relationship to the falsified account had become very clear, quietly resigned before the investigation concluded. The non-disclosure agreement I had never signed could not protect people who had assumed it would, and the story that had been buried when they fired me found its way to the surface anyway. Truth, I've learned, is not always fast, but it is persistent. I drove back through Seattle the autumn after the story published. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just wanted to see the city again from the outside, as a person who no longer had any reason to be afraid of it. The rain was the same. The gray sky was the same. But something had settled in me that hadn't been there before. I heard from a few former colleagues in the months that followed. Some reached out with a directness that surprised me. Marcus sent a message through LinkedIn that was 3 sentences long and said more in what it didn't say than in what it did. Patricia sent a longer message. She said she hadn't known the full story, and she was sorry for the impression she had given. I believed her. I don't think most people are cruel by intent. I think they fill in the gaps with whatever story is easiest, and the easiest story is almost never the true one. What I want you to take from this, if you take anything, is not that the truth always wins in a dramatic, cinematic way. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the person with the expensive shoes keeps the expensive shoes, and nothing is ever corrected, and the world moves on. I've seen that happen too. But in this case, the documentation mattered. The refusal to sign mattered. The quiet, steady decision to keep my own record when everyone around me was constructing a different narrative, that mattered. I lost 6 years of work in a Thursday morning. I gained something slower and harder to name, a clarity about what I was willing to carry in silence and what I wasn't. The people who laughed when I walked out of that office weren't bad people. They just didn't know what I was carrying. And for a long time, neither did anyone else. But the truth has a way of introducing itself, eventually, on its own schedule, in its own time. You just have to be patient enough to still be standing when it does.